Welcome, grievers, and I'm so sorry you're here. The Stillbirth podcast was created by a website called thebluestcircle.com, a homepage with a list of resources designed to bring you comfort and information during and after your loss, and to prevent future losses during subsequent pregnancies that some choose to pursue. I am your host, Ray Jagger, a poet, yoga teacher, former birth doula, and a lost mom to baby Fox in the stars. Today, we'll be discussing pregnancy after loss, or affectionately known as PALS in our community. And this term is used for any pregnancy that comes after loss at any stage, but today we're going to be focusing in on pregnancy after stillbirth. So a loss that's 20 plus weeks gestation. We'll be talking about how hard it is, how to survive it, how to find the right provider, how to keep some faith and hope, some of those things. Our guest is Erica Zaldivar. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a bereaved mother. In March of 2021, her first daughter died at 13 days old in the NICU after a birth injury during home birth. Erica has since spent her time writing and connecting with other bereaved parents on her Instagram page. And write this down or go find it now, but it's Traveling with Grief, and it's an excellent resource for parents. She shares her story to reduce the stigma around baby loss and grief, and to honor her daughters, Verity Aurora and Ara Rose, who is due next month. May she arrive peacefully and safely. So Erica, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And would you begin by telling us a little bit about your sweet girl, Verity, and just like what happened?
Well, thanks, Ray. And thank you for, holding space for us to talk about our stories and connect with other parents. It's just so important. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And so Verity, she was perfect. It's like, it's obviously so tragic anytime we lose a child, and especially to something that could have been prevented, and so that's, really difficult. Like, so she died of a brain injury after, complication during our home birth. So she was 9.6 pounds, super healthy girl, perfect pregnancy, no complications there. And she was just beautiful, so that was kind of, that's what we're facing, our story. So thanks for letting me share about her.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, you had mentioned it was preventable? Was it like how long?
So basically it's been really tough because at first we were told one thing, and then I kind of just accepted that was what my midwives told me, and I didn't really question it, obviously, when we were so traumatized and just grieving and in shock, and I just accepted that. And then about 6 months postpartum, I decided to go get some fertility testing done just to ease my mind, to make sure, like, since I was like, well, we don't really know, this is what I was told. And so that sort of started a process for me when I was like, a little more coherent, to be able to ask some specific questions about what had happened, and possibly, and that sort of like started a trajectory for me to get to the point to where I understand now, which is, it was just most likely a mismanaged labor of kind of overconfidence in my midwives. And so really unfortunate. And I talk about this a lot in regard to, my midwives didn't have ill intent. There wasn't like, and this is like a really difficult thing for, obviously, like, people who aren't familiar with home birth, but like, I genuinely don't believe there was malice. Like, it wasn't, but it was just like, unfortunately, there's this thing that, I talk a lot about, of like intent versus impact. Like, we might not have intended to harm somebody, but unfortunately we did. And the impact is, unfortunately, the death of my daughter. And so, that's, that's kind of what it's taken me actually just up until kind of recently to really be able to, I wouldn't say accept, but like kind of face it head on. I think we have so many layers of protection around our grief and trauma that it took me a really long time to be able to really just wrap my head around the fact that this is the reality,
Yeah. It hasn't been very long, it's been March.
So it's been 16 months in total. So it really and that's something that has been really fascinating for me, even as a therapist, to be reminded of, that like, when we have traumatic events occur, our story may change as we, our brain starts to do different things and process. And we're in therapy and, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of been a bit of my journey for sure. And I think that's been a little confusing to people to watch because I started in one space and ended in a completely different one, and sometimes that's what I'm just like reminding people like, okay, or even just reminding myself when I hear somebody in a certain space, like we don't know what their birth story is going to be at the end, of in a couple of years, they might feel differently,
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, that was actually really, I wasn't expecting that. Like, that was really shocking for me. I was like, wow, I really felt this way. And I really thought this was my narrative. And then getting more information and processing really changed that for me.
Yeah. And more distance and neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yes.
You were like, it's healthy. It's like good to change the story. It's accepting the new information you get and putting it as a part of the story.
Right. Which is also flipping exhausting.
And hard. It's like reopening and re-triggering over and over.
Oh my gosh. Then different emotions with that different information, like just so much stuff. Right. So,
and I will say, your story in a way is more complicated only because most people say I had a cord accident, or like me, we had a small placenta and it couldn't, Fox could only survive to a certain point. But once you move outside of the realms of cord accidents and placenta stuff, like it's a little bit more of a gray area. So it's like it's longer to have a story to build.
It really does. And it's been a little bit interesting in my, like, even my identity as like a lost mom of like, well, was she stillborn? Like, does she qualify as she was born unresponsive, then resuscitated, but brain dead in the NICU. We were hoping something would happen after her treatments. And so so is it, she technically was alive, but she never opened her eyes, and so it's been very, my situation, I feel very like, I'm like, what do, like, where do I fall? Like, and so it's really, it's very complex. I feel like our story, and, there's like just so many layers because there was the unknown. We did have a home birth, but we were transferred. So I kind of ended up with like everything: birth trauma, NICU trauma, baby death trauma. Like, I mean, it was just like everything.
You have it all.
Yeah.
I hate that for you.
Thanks. I know, I hate it too, but that's but Verity, just really special girl. She was obviously our first child, and really planned for, I kept, her name for like 6 years prior. Like, that was so thanks for letting me share about her.
Of course. And also, if you go on her Instagram, Traveling with Grief, again, there are pictures of Verity, and it's common for us as lost moms to want to share what our babies look like and to have conversations around them. And it's very normal because we want to just like, it's a additional way of processing, but this is the only memory that we have of our children, regardless of NICU stay or not. Like, that one moment we got to hold them, however long it was, and getting to see them and what they looked like and who they looked like and what they smelled like, all of those things that people really celebrate when they have a living, breathing newborn baby. We still have those moments. We just have to say goodbye to our babies. So, I think it's beautiful that you share pictures, and I love when people do that. It takes a lot of bravery. Many people, I think, don't. There's a lot of resistance, I think, from people who don't have lost babies to see that. It's really triggering for them. No one wants to see someone else's dead baby, which my neighbor said to me, and I was like, you're right. No one wants to see my baby, but here's a picture of him.
Right. It's so hard because it's like, these are our children, and that's another layer of kind of where we get slapped in the face as bereaved parents, right?
And you're still a mom. Did you celebrate Verity's first birthday?
Yeah, we didn't, so it was really tough because it was like, one thing I know I'll hear a lot of people say sometimes, like, it still was a great day, even though XYZ happened and we lost them. And I just didn't resonate with that. I was like, no, this is the worst day of my life. Like, I am not celebrating this, this is her birth. This is the day she was born. And it was the worst tragedy for me. And so for us, we decided it was like, instead of like saying, well, it's her first birthday. Like I was like, I don't think I can get a cake, or like, you know, for me personally, it was like, that wasn't, but I did want to do something to honor her. So we've chosen as a family, like my husband and I, that we're going to do a trip every year in her honor. Of like, we really like traveling. That's why my page ended up being Traveling with Grief. But so I was like, we want to do something, travel somewhere in honor of her, where we would have liked to take her every year. And so what I chose to do was do like, so we went to Oregon this year. And so we went to Oregon, and that worked really well for us, because I think just being around people was too hard. Like it was like, and being at the house, no way, like I just got to get it out of here. And so for us, it was really great. We went to Oregon, got really lucky with great weather, and I made her like a flower mandala in the sand, and put her picture in it, and just stayed, you know, and just like spent some time thinking about our journey. And that was kind of how I chose to honor her for her birthday.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Everyone does something different. What you said resonates with me a lot more. We haven't hit our year date yet, but when we do, we are going to travel and not be in our same house where we experience the worst tragedy of our life.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just so doing what, you know, whether people understand or not, doing what's best for you and your family, I think is just so important. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So since this is all about pregnancy after loss, I guess the first question to kind of transition there would be, what made you all decide, or like, did you decide to have another child right away? Is it something that like took a lot of time to process? Did you just get pregnant? Like, what was sort of your journey there?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So at first it was like this really like immediately it was like this major conflict. It was like, if somebody would have handed me a baby, I would have been like, okay, you know, like it was just, I was so fucked up that like I was so ready to like have a child, like literally went into labor, and you know, she never came home, you know, like it was just so I knew, you know, at first we were in the hospital, my husband and I, just like devastated, like I don't think we can ever go through this again, like horrified. But within like even days, we were like, okay, we definitely want to have a child. Like we plan to be parents. Like this is, for me, it was a huge piece of my life of preparing, you know, even within my career of like, you know, child development and everything. Like I was very intentional about preparing to have a child, and what that would mean for my life. So we did decide we would want to do that, but I had to do physical therapy after. And we were obviously very hesitant based on what happened with our situation. So at about 6 months postpartum, we were checking in, and decided to do some fertility testing to see like, well, we don't feel ready yet, but do we want to freeze my eggs? Like, do we want to,
That's
you know,
smart.
I'm 30, I'm 34 now. And so I was like, well, let me just go get some tests done, you know? And then actually that uncovered quite a bit for us. I found out I have Hashimotos. So something that impacts your thyroid, obviously. So, and like a couple other things, that like a low egg reserve. So
not what you want to hear.
No. So
rude.
That sent my anxiety through the roof. That was like, I went doomsday and was like, I'm never going to be able to have kids again. Like,
get all the eggs out and freeze them.
Oh my gosh. So it just sent me, it really put me in a dark place, and I had to really process like what we wanted to do. And so we ultimately, even though I truly didn't feel ready physically or emotionally to try again, it was like, we don't, you know, we could be gambling with, maybe we wouldn't get a chance if we wait. Right. And so we just decided to start trying again. And I did a couple of the diagnostic fertility procedures and HSG, hysteroscopy, like just making sure, which, you know, if people are unfamiliar, the hysteroscopy basically was just checking my uterus to make sure the lining was okay and that there was nothing abnormal happening. And then the HSG, make sure there's not like blockages in your tubes, and just like
flush it out.
So we did decide to, you know, they did recommend for me to do that just based on our story, you know, our history. So then it took us a while. So I think I got pregnant finally at the end of December. So, you know, I think I was like 9.5 months postpartum at that point, almost 10 months postpartum. So so that was kind of our journey, and it was really stressful. Like the trying to conceive after loss piece is a whole other mind fuck. Like just,
it re-triggers you. It re-triggers you in ways you don't know.
People would say to me, well, at least you can have fun. I'm like, you think this is fun? What is, you know, like,
why?
No, there is no romance here. Like this is, I'm like peeing on these ovulation strips, and
it's transactional.
losing my mind. And, each period that I got where it wasn't a pregnancy, I was like, they may well have killed Verity again. Like I was like in bed for
Oh,
2 days. Like, it was really intense for me.
yes.
It
Yes.
was, and I empathize with people who already had fertility struggles. Like I can't identify with that. Like we did get lucky and get pregnant right away with Verity.
Yeah.
And, I can't say that it took a super long time to get pregnant second time either, but even just within that small period of time with the compiled grief and trauma and anxiety and fear, and people would tell me it'll happen. And I would say, you don't know that.
You don't know that. Yeah.
And it would really upset me. And people would try to like ease my nerves of like, just, it'll happen and
Just a
relax.
little
And,
light gaslighting for your journey.
oh my gosh. And I would just be enraged. So, but we did get lucky and finally did, get pregnant again. And so kind of to roll into like what that journey, then it was like a whole other ball
Can
game.
you tell us what it was like to get that positive test? Because that's a whole nother thing. Like
Oh my
once you look
gosh.
at it.
Yeah, it was really, and like most of us who are in this, when we're trying to conceive, we are doing a lot of the testing and, just like neurotic, unfortunately. And so I had, the big packs of the HCG strips that you get off, offline. And so I was like, I think I was like 10 days date past ovulation and just like, there at midnight with the dang thing looking in the, and so I saw the first day and it was New Year's Eve. So my husband and I were like sitting there and I like looking at it. I'm like, do you see a line? Do you see it? We're like having it like, and it was like super faint. And I was like, okay, well, and then I did just like, watch it over the next few days and it did get darker. And it honestly, it was like disbelief because it was so different from our first experience, that where I like missed my period and it was just like, okay, like it was,
Right.
this was so different this time.
When you were more innocent and you had no idea what would happen to you and everything was just different. Yeah.
It was just, I'm pregnant, I'm gonna have a baby. Yeah, it was,
I would kill to go back there.
right? Yeah, like, and to be honest, I actually was a pretty anxious first time mom. I don't know if just being a therapist and, I did have prior trauma. So I think a little bit of my naivety was already shattered, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I was like, well, like, but it was like the whole time I was told everything's fine. So it was very interesting to have that level of anxiety and then have something did end up going wrong, but yeah, so getting, that test. And then luckily, this is one thing that I feel like really did help me. And I know everybody doesn't have the privilege for this or won't qualify or fall into this category, but the benefit of being under care of the fertility clinic is that they monitor you so closely. So as soon as I had that positive pregnancy test, they had me go for blood work and then had me come every few days the first week or two to make sure my HCG was rising, put me on progesterone. I started Lovenox, which is the blood thinner shots that a lot of—
Hey, me too.
Yeah, so a lot of lost moms, somehow that seems to be something that they do to just kind of help us get some extra circulation and blood flow to the placenta, right? So
yeah, I have a clotting disorder, but yeah, other people get Lovenox just to also, you can, because it's such a low dose to just ease your mind. Yeah.
Right. So technically, yeah, like the Hashimotos makes me at risk for clotting too. So that's kind of like the reason, it's like, okay, there's some double benefit to this for you, like, so yeah, so they started me and then we got to go every week for an ultrasound. And most people do not get that chance. Yeah.
How early did you go for an ultrasound?
6 weeks. We did our first. So once my HCG was, rising and it was like, okay, everything's looking good and all my labs were doing good. Then at 6 weeks, we did the first ultrasound and then I went every week until 11 weeks.
Wow.
And then I switched to the high risk OB, MF, perinatology.
MFM. I do want to say for those watching, most OBs, if you ask them once you find out you're pregnant for a beta blood draw, many OBs are totally fine with running your betas. And just for those watching who might not know what that is, that's your HCG. And sometimes they also pull your progesterone. When you're newly pregnant, you want your progesterone to be around 20. It supports your HCG rising. It's what makes you tired. It's what makes a lot of the symptoms also. A lot of doctors or OBs will do it if you request it, especially if you talk about how anxious you are for whatever reason. And then just getting one isn't enough. You have to get two. It tells more of a story. It's something that's supposed to rise every 48 hours by a minimum of 66%. Otherwise, it should be doubling really over 48 hours. So you had that from when you found out you were pregnant until about 6 weeks, and then you got an ultrasound every week. That is incredible. Please tell me about whether or not that eased your mind.
It did. And I've talked to so many other lost moms experiencing pregnancy after loss. And I just honestly, I really feel for them because their doctors are just like, okay, see you in 3-4 weeks. And
yeah,
as a bereaved parent with all our trauma, I mean, it's so you're just literally in limbo anxiety land for those weeks. And not that I wasn't still anxious, because obviously we know anything can happen at any point, whether you have an ultrasound that day or not, but it was at least a little bit of an ease of like, well, okay, I have this one more piece of information that right now this little being is growing. Okay, well, I'll take it, so it really did personally help me. Like, honestly, I feel almost like bad sometimes. I'm like, I kind of am like a fertility clinic pusher because I want my friends to get the ultrasound.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I will say a fertility clinic, they're not as expensive as people think, although insurance doesn't cover them. But IUI in some places, that's when you are artificially seminated. In order to do IUI, they have to do that HSG and then other things to like check you, get a bunch of blood tests, but it gives you answers if you have had miscarriages in the past, and you don't need to have 3 to go. And then automatically the perk is getting those extra ultrasounds. And honestly, no matter how much they are, it's peace of mind. And it's like one time in your life. It's a secret.
I got really lucky. My insurance covered it all, honestly.
Wow.
I mean, we actually, so literally we're scheduled to go in 3 days to schedule an IUI because I was like, this isn't happening. And then I got my positive pregnancy test because so the IUI wasn't going to be covered. That obviously was going to be very expensive, medications and everything. But everything else was covered because they were diagnostic procedures based on our history. And the ultrasounds, everything was, covered. So thankfully I'm very privileged there. That's so that's not norm.
Yeah, you're right. It's not available for everyone, and it's a huge privilege.
Every state is different too. So that's the thing. Like one of my friends, like she has the, similarly great insurance PPO plan, but she's in a different state. So it's just different.
Yeah. So some of the ultrasounds, just so I can give people some tangible ideas to how this helped. There's a 6-week one, and that tells you that you have a gestational sac and a yolk sac. Is that when you got a heartbeat? Like, was that some information you picked up that made you?
We did get that information that day, but a lot of people don't. Like it's I guess common that maybe the heartbeat won't be able to be seen at that point, and that doesn't indicate something's wrong. It's just early.
Right. Yeah. What about some of the other ultrasounds that you got that early? What are some pieces of information that they gave you that made you feel like, okay, this is okay? Because, miscarriage is the highest in the beginning of pregnancy. Stillbirth is so uncommon. Obviously, we're here to show that it happens, but
I think mostly, like, I'm just trying to think back. It was that everything was going okay. There wasn't like, any excess, like, blood clots forming or, different things. I think they looked at that. I think trying to think of what they would tell me, like around
it
just
might have seen like the placenta developing, I think.
Yeah, that kind of, so that, and so eventually then they tell you where your placenta, attachment is and that kind of thing. So yeah, the beginning ones, they didn't really tell much, to be honest. It was just like, okay, everything's good. And I was like, okay. Yeah, so that was kind of our journey there. And then we transferred over to, it's been a little bit more intense, gotten more intense with the high risk OB, because they obviously are just so thorough. So
did you interview high risk OBs? Like, did you know who you were going to go to beforehand? What was that like?
Yeah, so before we got pregnant, when we were doing working with the fertility clinic and potentially going to schedule for the IUI, I was like, I just want to talk to them and see what the plan would be, like what the process would be in our situation, and have somebody know our case and story. And that was really important to me. So there was one that had been referred by several people that I knew, And then we ended up just having a really positive experience with him. We met with a genetic counselor prior. She was very sensitive and we really liked talking with her. And then he spent a good amount of time with us and answered all of our questions, basically reassured us that we would be able to do the birth plan that we wanted, which was a scheduled C-section at like 37, 38 weeks. And he was like all for it, kind of told us how it went, kind of eased my nerves and gave us that information. And then it was like, okay, well, call us when you're pregnant, and so that's kind of what happened. So we didn't interview a ton. Honestly, I just didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to do it. Like, I was like, you know what? I think this sounds great. I've got some really good positive feedback from my community and we're just going to go forward with this here, so I didn't personally interview. I know a lot of people interview a lot more, which totally get it. You should, especially if you don't feel comfortable, like 100%. But we did get lucky and we're like, okay, I think this is, this will work out. And so then we did start working with him and they got us, and it's honestly been seamless. Like I've had a really positive experience with them. Like anytime, like just for example, like I had some spotting at different times of my pregnancy and totally like sent me off the deep end.
Of course.
Called them right away. They got me in within 30 minutes. I don't live far from there. They're like, can you come in 30 minutes? Yep, I'll be there in 10. Like I was just like,
perfect.
I'm in there crying already, but it's like, just tell me everything's okay because, and every pregnancy is different. I never had spotting with Verity, but I also wasn't on the blood thinners, so it's like,
right.
So many different variables. But thankfully the 2 times I did have to go in kind of on rush anxiety, it was okay. But I've been very thankful. Like they're just super sensitive like I've never felt dismissed. And my doctor, I have his personal number. He's like, text me anytime. I obviously don't take it. I don't, abuse that, but I have asked him some questions sometimes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. My OB also gave us her cell phone number, but it was not responsive in a way that was helpful for Fox. So it's like, okay, I'm glad you have someone good. And you're right. Like some people interview a ton of people. They have a checklist of a ton of things they ask. I'm not going to ask you what some of the questions are you ask, because I feel like there could be so many, but most of the time I feel like lost moms want to know that whatever their plan is, the safest route to get baby out is just something that's going to be heard and supported. And almost all of us have a scheduled C-section. Some people try to get it as early as 34, 35 weeks. So it's totally normal to choose the route that is going to get you a baby earthside safely and breathing, so that's just a very typical, safe, more comforting choice than some of the unpredictabilities of giving birth by being
and obviously it's more grief. I obviously chose a home birth for a reason. It was a very, that's one thing that I struggle with. I think it's like a misconception of people think like, oh, somebody's choosing a home birth, they're being lax or they're not making like a careful decision, when really I had known dozens of people have healthy home births and had done so much research and had such a thorough plan and, really was a candidate for it. And it was very intentional, it was like quite the opposite. And so me choosing that and then to go from the, swing to the opposite end of the, pendulum of getting a scheduled C-section, it is definitely more grief. And, I was trying to, it's a lot. Yeah. But
you mourn the loss of the pregnancy you want to have if everything had not occurred.
Yeah, definitely.
And babies die in hospital. So I hate when people are like home birth, fetal death.
I know.
They don't happen any more than hospitals.
Right. Yeah. And so it's been, a lot, but it's also been good for, I've done a lot of work around just even like deconstructing my own paradigm around how I was fearmongered of interventions, that's a whole, I know we're maybe not going to go into that today, but like I could go on about that a lot, so that's been another piece of, and now here I'm having this really, I would say my actual prenatal care when I was pregnant with Verity was actually also very clinical. My midwives were more clinical, but this is even more so, definitely getting more things checked and in a different way. And I'm also, I'm having a good experience. So certain things that I was like, oh, I'm afraid of that, or I don't want to do that. And now I'm like, oh, why, what was going on there,
You're in really good company, because as a birth doula who has seen a variety of births, I never attended a home birth just because of my own fear of just not being in a hospital setting. And I thought more advocacy needed to happen at the hospital level. But I had to, after Fox died, reevaluate all of my beliefs as a yoga teacher, as a birth doula. All of those interventions are things that were bad, are things that could potentially save babies. So it really does make you hit, I'm sure you're familiar with choice point and ACT therapy. It makes you like reevaluate your whole life and the beliefs you had. And some people don't have to do that ever. And here we are doing it, with this birth. And, if you choose to have more, you'll be, we'll be right back here doing this again.
Right. Yes. And totally. That's exactly, I had to really, really take a deep dive and get honest with myself that the information, one of the things like I was told again and again is, but you made informed decisions. You made informed decisions. And I would just listen. And now looking back, and I know wholeheartedly, no, I did not. I did not make informed decisions because I did not have all the information. And you don't know what you don't know, but at that time there, if I'm being fed things in an echo chamber and it is biased information, I'm not making informed decisions. And I think that's really hard for us as humans to accept when, we could look at the 20 birth books that I had that I was, reading and doing research and say, yeah, I made informed decisions, but ultimately did I, if all the information was all in line with one's particular narrative, then no, I did not, and so that's definitely been, a hard pill to swallow, but I am glad that I'm, owning that.
It requires so much self-compassion to be like, I made the best decisions I could with the information I had. And it's just like, there's no going back. And you're exactly, it's so hard to grapple with if I only had known this, if I only had changed this decision based off of something else. And it's just like a horrible place to have to visit those what ifs.
Right. And I think it's, pregnancy after loss, does have, then it's like, that's the opportunity is like, okay, what are, we are going to maybe do some things differently, or, what am I going to do now that I might have more information? As much as it sucks, it's like, that's kind of part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How are you surviving like on a mental, let's assume like there's high anxiety. Oh, my hand's disappearing. High anxiety. And then there's like, I don't want to say peak, but very different ends of the spectrum. Let's just say there's a spectrum, which we know there is not two emotions. There's not a spectrum. It's more like a circle. But let's just say like you can move between the two. Are there tangible things that you do that make you feel a little bit more, I don't want to say in control because there's only something you can control, but just like a little bit more at peace? Or like, how are you managing your day-to-day survival?
Like my initial answer to that is like, no, like, which is like, it's funny. It's like, I don't know. Even it's funny as a therapist, I oftentimes in my grief and trauma of this experience, I can't even access all the coping skills that I had prior. And that's been really humbling and hard. And, but what I will say is even at the simplest level, I would say is like literally focusing on my basic needs is the tangible, so definitely staying in therapy. I mean, so I do have a perinatal loss therapist that I work with. So that I think is something tangible, definitely like that, works for me, helpful. Does it solve it? Does it take away my anxiety? No, but it
gets some of it out of your body.
Yeah, somebody I can, debrief with, kind of just stay in touch with, make sure somebody has eyes on me, at least, so long as I'm being honest and not, disassociating too much. But so that, piece, my husband and I do couples therapy. That's also helpful for us to just kind of talk through, because he has a whole other experience and set of anxieties and feels out of control. And, I would say like, I think it's changed every trimester for me a little bit, in the sense that like first trimester, it was literally like, I'm so sick, I can't even sit up straight without just feeling like death. That aggravated my depression. That, then that made me angry. I was like, I shouldn't even be pregnant again right now. I'm pissed. My body hurts. I don't want to be pregnant again right now. Like, it was just, as much as I wanted to, because this is the only vehicle for me to have a baby. I'm mad, so it stirred a lot so it was like almost like it reopened all this stuff. So tangibly, really, like as far as things I was doing was just like, I know I can take my prenatals. I can look at, the information the doctor is giving me to know that this is moving along further. And I like made minimal commitments. So like if I didn't have to do something, I didn't do it. It was like just survive. It was like,
that's good boundaries.
yeah, I was just like, I'm just I rested a lot. Like I was like, I'm not fighting this. I'm tired. This is hard. I'm just going to rest. I'm not going to force myself to do anything. And I think that's one thing that, if of all things for me personally, has been the most helpful for me, is to not judge anything I'm feeling and not try to do anything with it. Like, this is how I feel. I don't like it. I might not like it, but I'm not going to panic to say, I'm feeling this way. Should I not be feeling this way? So that's honestly been really helpful for me to just be like, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And then be like, what do I need to do with this? Since this is where I'm at, what do I need to do? I feel really shitty. Okay, I'm going to lay down.
You're responding to what your body needs, and you're not building a story around it of like bigger, more complicated things that you don't need to build a story around.
Yeah. And it was like,
wow, I'm amazed you can do that. That's something I've been working on my whole life.
I mean, it's not always easy. But like, honestly, I think that's also where my boundary was, like, to not even talk to a lot, like sometimes not even tell certain people, like, because I don't need advice. I don't need solutions. Like, I'm not, it's not like, well, do you want to do this? And maybe that'll make you feel better. It's like, no, I just need to feel like shit right now. Just leave me alone.
And your body, your body. No one else does.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, it was really hard. I know it was really hard for my husband because I was so dark. I was just so dark, honestly. And then at like 16 weeks, thankfully the sickness left, and I was like, oh, I think I'm kind of human again. And then so then I had like a little bit of energy, and I would try to get out for a walk. Like, then it was like, maybe I could access some of the things that was, my old self-care things that really enjoy being outside, or even if it was just like, okay, Erica, just take your water and just go sit in the sun for 5 minutes, just like really basic. I think we over complicate our, things that, we need to do. Like, I hear people being like, I need to do, like, I'm not doing all the things I used to do. And I'm like, you're not going to.
Yeah.
I don't think we can ever expect, especially in the first year, and then with pregnancy after loss, it's like, I was talking to Carol, she runs Empty Arms Bereavement. I don't know if you're familiar with their organization, but she gave me the best analogy that was like so validating. She was like, if people can, get in a plane crash, they can say, I'm never going on a plane again. She's like, but, for us who want to have a baby, again, and go through pregnancy again, we are thrown right into the vehicle that, like, we're right in the trauma. Our body was the vehicle, not the airplane. We can't say, oh, I'm just not going to go on an airplane again, but I can travel.
We're the airplane. Yeah.
We're the airplane. And so I was like, yes, there's no avoidance, and there's no real thing to escape other than be with, which is just so hard. And in trauma, we already have trouble being in our body again. Going through that. And so it just, I think that's what's tough, is like, for me, there's not like one particular tangible thing at any point. It's just like maybe a bunch of little things that it's like, whatever you need, try to do that and don't question it,
Yeah.
It's like, I was like so meticulous about my diet my whole first pregnancy. And this time I'm like, you know what? I guess I'm eating a bean and cheese burrito again. And I'm just like, I'm like, I can't stress over it. Like, everything I did before didn't save her,
Exactly.
And so I'm just like,
some of the things in pregnancy are like almost designed to make people feel guilty, or to like almost exert some control over people, because really, as long as you're eating your food groups, like, nothing you eat, no amount of exercise you do is going to prevent a stillbirth, depending on the circumstances.
So it's really, I think that is the biggest thing, is like trying to just offer self-compassion and just be like, you know what, I went through hell. Like, I'm not going to give myself a hard time right now. The world gives us enough of a hard time. There's so much pressure on mothers in general. And then it's like, one thing I've really struggled with is like, even it was kind of triggering for my OB to say this to me recently. He was like, okay, like, we're going to have you come in and this is our kind of method of like hopefully preventing stillbirth kind of thing. But ultimately you're the best monitor, you as the mom, because you're with this kiddo and I was like, I hate that. It's so much pressure. Because it's like, oh, so if I, and that's kick counts are really triggering for me, like it's really hard for me to do that. I did kick counts with Verity and that didn't matter, and so
it doesn't solve everything.
Oh, and so the pressure is just like, oh, so much. So I just try to be like, you know what, I'll do my best. I don't do kick counts the way everybody does kick counts. I more track patterns because that's what gives me less anxiety. And I'm like, okay, like it's,
Yeah, I do want to do a plug for kick counts for specific things. Like kick counts can be really triggering, of course, but most people kick count to find your baby's pattern, just like what you said. And what you're looking for is decreased fetal movement that might suggest a complication, like having a knot in a cord or having a cord around the neck or having a small placenta. And some of those are like really, there's some causes of stillbirth that are like kick counts might not be as helpful, especially a birth trauma, something that happens in labor. But for other stillbirths, it can be a great prevention tool, but still nothing is a guarantee. I think that's the hardest thing. There's no safe place in pregnancy. People without loss are like, oh my God, I made it to 12 weeks. I can make an announcement. Oh, I feel so good. And, we know there's no point in pregnancy at which you are safe. And we have to live with that. And it is bullshit.
Right. Yeah, it's so hard. And and nothing against kick counts. Like obviously we should do them, it's
for you, it wouldn't have been helpful.
And it's, I mean, I still obviously am paying attention to movement very closely, but it's just the pressure, I think, even on us in general of like being like, okay, well, even if we do kick counts and we have decreased movement, did we get to the hospital in time? And it's like this whole, it's just so much, but
it's a lot of pressure on us. And it sucks. I love the airplane metaphor. That is so good. I'm going to use that now. But it's just like, no matter what, all the pressure is on us, because of course we know our body's the best and we know our baby's the best because they're growing inside us. But it's just that, I think, insinuates blame. When something goes wrong, who's the first person to blame? It's us. Well, not everything is under control, and we do the best we can with the amount of information we have, and we can't save everyone. And it's just so shitty because it makes us feel so bad. So I think language is so important when OBs are talking about kick counting, being really like having some awareness with language.
For sure. And it's like, as as a lost mom, like once we enter into this realm, it's like now we have all this other information of ways that babies can die that we didn't have before. And it's so completely overwhelmed. I mean, so now I'm about to be 31 weeks, and some of the things that, I never even knew of before that I obviously know so much now about. So even just a cough, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, is my, I have like an anterior placenta. I'm like, am I going to tear my placenta? I'm like, any little erratic movement. I'm like, what are you doing? Are you going to strangle? Are you going to pull your cord? Like, I'm so,
we play it all out in our heads.
So real. It's so real. And so like, honestly, like the only thing, like there's like a couple of things like for me now, like I do have a Doppler, and I know they're not reliable and not suggested in a lot of cases of it doesn't determine baby's health. But that does help my anxiety of like, if I don't feel her moving like for a little bit, I'm like, okay, I can hear her heart rate. I know what it is. At least that, I mean, that is something it's worked for me. I know for a lot of people, it increases anxiety. So
Interesting.
Yeah. I've heard, anxiety. Yeah. Like, well, I think maybe sometimes, like, I know one of my friends, she'd said like early on when it was hard to find the heartbeat,
and anterior placenta, they can be hard to find the heartbeat on a Doppler.
And it actually did trigger me a little bit in the beginning because I had it with Verity as well. I did not have an anterior placenta though. So I did use the Doppler with Verity, but it was always, I could find her heartbeat, no problem. It never triggered me. So I just ended up not using it a ton, but this, with this baby, I'm obviously super anxious. And so I do use it, but so the anterior placenta has not worked in my favor in the sense of, I also didn't get to have like track movement as soon because I didn't really feel like strong movement patterns until like, maybe the early 20s. it was like actually really, that was really tough for me. I was like, really?
Yeah, anterior placentas. Fox had one. And I will say Dopplers can be comfort, but the last thing to always go is a heartbeat. And I hate saying this, but like to people listening, it's important to like, as a doula, I always encourage people not to use a heartbeat only because count kicks tell you more, but to have a Doppler and to hear the comfort of your baby's heartbeat while also doing count the kicks and all the other things and just having like general awareness, it's really comforting to hear that heartbeat and to know it's there and to like know how fast it is or how slow it is. Like those are, again, like you said in the beginning, it's information that you take in that you can use. And it's just, we want more information to feel safe. And having that, I think, is vital. I'm glad you have a Doppler.
Yeah, so it personally helps me, but yeah, it's everybody's individual experience, right? So yeah, and then I mean, it has gotten harder as I'm getting bigger, and her movements, like initially when I first started feeling her move, it triggered a lot of my birth trauma, like because I was unmedicated during labor, so obviously felt Verity's last moves, and so it's really intense. I think for I think our society loves to silver line, and so I've gotten it all. Aren't you so grateful? And like just be thankful, and it's going to work out this time, and all these things that I'm like, I don't align with that. Like somebody recently told me, and it was obviously innocent, but again, the intent versus impact. She was like, embrace it. And I was like,
ew,
I don't want to fucking embrace it, because guess what? This is so painful.
Yeah.
Embracing it means embracing that I'm here in the first place, and I'm not embracing that. It's tragic. And the thing is, I'm not real, I'm very confrontational. I'm not in a mean way, but I say like, actually, that's really not helpful for me.
Yeah, good for you.
What she had said was embrace it because it goes so quickly. And I was like, I would actually like it to go quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to have this speed up here. So, I've joked, I'm just like, I just wish somebody could knock me out until I'm ready to have my C-section. Like, please, somebody do me the favor. Like, and I just talk so, openly about it, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to sugarcoat. This is actually really hard and really fucked up. And I would not be pregnant again. And, pregnancy wasn't easy for me to begin with, so it was like one of those things, like I really struggled feeling out of control of my body. And I got like a lot of symptoms that people didn't, really bad carpal tunnel, like really bad hip pain. And, now I have physical injuries from labor. Like I honestly, my pelvis and my hips really have a hard time now. And doing back-to-back pregnancy is hard on my body.
Yeah.
And it's been really triggering. So sometimes, my coping is just, especially in that late second trimester when you're stretching a lot, I just would wake up in the middle of the night, which was when I was in labor, middle of the night, and I would just cry and just, feel sorry for myself, and then drink some water and go back to bed, try. And but I'm not ever going to sugarcoat that for people just to make them comfortable. I don't take for granted the fact that I've been able to get pregnant again. That doesn't mean that I take that for granted,
I think it's important and it's valuable. And I appreciate that you tell people when maybe the things that they say aren't helpful or are harmful even, because oftentimes being like gaslit or minimizing our grief pushes us into this corner where we don't want to talk about it anymore because we don't feel like we're being heard. People aren't holding space for us. People don't understand, regardless if they mean well. So it's important to have the bravery to be like, listen, that's not, no. Take that out of your repertoire. Maybe that works on someone who didn't have a stillborn baby, but it's not trauma informed, and it's just insulting.
Yeah, it's just, and unfortunately I've lost a lot of connections because I'm honest, and that's just, some of the secondary losses that we experience, in as bereaved parents. And I think that's and I totally understand why a lot of people don't speak up, because it does create more conflict and more stress. Because like I haven't had the best experience when I've been honest with people. People get defensive. They gaslight you. Like they've gaslit me, just saying, well, she like, that person, she was like, you turned this into something negative. And I was like, did I? I was like,
no.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh,
It's
okay.
more work. It's just more work for you because people can't just accept that they said something not
Yeah,
very nice.
own responsibility in a way to say, you know what, I'm so sorry, and that must be really hard. Yeah, like that's it,
Yeah,
you know.
that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely what a journey.
Oh, man. First of all, no one wants to be here. We don't want
Yeah,
to be pregnant again after having a dead baby. This isn't for
right,
funsies. We just literally
right.
want live children. And I think that's so important for people watching to see that
Yeah.
being pregnant again, pregnancy after loss, any loss, but especially after stillbirth,
Mhm.
is such a mind bleep. And then
Yeah.
also it's everyday torture. And then there's no guarantee even at the end that you get a baby out of it. And it's even more complicated if you've had a stillbirth and you have recurring losses. I talked to many lost moms who had
Yeah.
3 or 4 or 5 miscarriages before and after a stillbirth.
Oh,
And it's like,
yeah.
once you get there, just seeing a second pink line isn't some guarantee that you're finally going to get your baby. It is truly a marathon of how can I survive, and some of the coping things that you talked about, which aren't even really coping things, they're just like basic survival things. They're just responding to what you need in that moment and not assigning meaning to that, like not saying like, oh, I'm being too something or other. You're just going with how you feel and giving your body or your mind what it needs in that moment. And I think that is a valuable self-care tool in the way that like a face mask or a shower isn't going to give you, which our family
Yeah.
likes to tell us.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's little things I try to do. I mean, I used to practice yoga regularly, and since Verity's death during labor, I have not gone back to practicing, yoga really. I mean, I'll do a little bit here and there, but it was really difficult to be in my body. Yeah. And so things that I used to access, now aren't as effective, and but okay, I'll take a bath, but it doesn't necessarily,
Doesn't fix anything, right?
no, yeah, for sure. But I think, you know, also just reminding myself that it's like, I think one thing I have told myself, I was trying to like remember, like, what were some of the things I like told myself throughout this pregnancy so far? It's like, I don't have control, and so just knowing that, like, just reminding myself, like, I can only do what I can do right now, and it's so hard. It's so hard,
Yeah.
so just like, I think that's been like the biggest thing that's helped me though, is just to be in that space and never forcing myself, to do anything really.
Right.
Like, yeah, like the added, even I know other people maybe aren't as nervous about COVID during pregnancy, for example, but with considering everything I've been through, I have an extra layer of anxiety about it. So
Yeah.
I'm quarantining right now and being very, very careful, because even though it's like this, I'm like, this is the third summer I've been locked in my house. I'm like, but at the same time, I'm like, this is what makes me feel comfortable. And so I don't need people to understand it for me, but this is what I'm doing. And this is where I'm at,
And that is a little bit of control. Like, you can stay home and minimize that risk. Whereas like other things you can't control, it feels good to have some things you can control, no
Yes,
matter how
definitely.
crazy they seem to other people.
Definitely.
Have you never gotten COVID?
Nope.
Me neither. It's
Yeah.
incredible, honestly.
I mean, yeah, like it's funny because I actually had a little scare. I got a stomach bug and went to the labor and delivery a couple weeks ago. And I was like, I was telling the nurse, I haven't had COVID. And she was like, you and 6 other people on the planet. And I was like, oh God.
Really?
She was joking, but I was like, yeah, I know. Like most everybody I know has had it multiple times.
Yeah. And with
So
Hashimoto's, like, does that affect other, like, are you more susceptible to getting illnesses? I don't know a lot about Hashimoto's. I know several people who have it, but I don't think I know a lot about what
it's
complications.
technically an autoimmune illness, so it doesn't present with like normal, like active symptoms per se. It's more of like a building in your immune, like probably over time decreasing things in your body. And so I did have symptoms though, and I do think this affected my first pregnancy, hindsight, was extreme fatigue and like low energy, like things like that, and then like difficulty managing your weight. Like I actually gained a lot of weight in my first pregnancy and kept saying, this seems weird, I'm not eating overeating and different stuff. And so, and weight has been a thing for me like my whole life, of just even when I'm eating really moderate and exercising. And it seemed to be, I would observe it being a lot more difficult than my peers, or, things like that. So things like that. But yeah, it's ultimately like inflammatory, it causes inflammation in your body.
It's a harder thing to diagnose. Like there's so many pregnancy things. There's like cholestasis, which you have it because like your palms itch, your stomach itches. There are easier gestational diabetes. It's like there's a test. It's easy to know whether or not you have it. And then there's Hashimotos, which is, a little bit harder.
Right. It's not a standard of what they would check during pregnancy. I guess my high risk OB does check everybody, but
that's cool.
He said he's just like, he said, he was like joking. He's like, I'm a thyroid freak. Like, he just like, I guess he's like really on it about people's thyroid. So, which has been, good. So, I mean, I'm obviously on thyroid medication now too. So yeah. And I do think it's been helpful. I mean, I don't know what I could attribute. I know every pregnancy is different that people say anyways, but I mean, I had a ton of swelling with Verity. By this point, I was super swollen, like wearing compression socks and like really having difficulty. And I don't have swelling this pregnancy. So
it's also so hard because every baby's different too.
That's what I was,
so it's like, well, how are we supposed to know everything? Every baby's different.
I have no idea. All I know is this time I'm not eating as healthy, and I'm doing the shots. The shots are really hard. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, those suck.
Yeah. Like I have really bad bruising. I don't know if
you hold it down for a good 3 minutes after. Because that's the only thing that has helped me not have bruises this big. I hold the shot site down after I've injected.
I don't know if you, wow. Like with the needle in you?
No, with it out. So it takes it out, and I notice if I don't hold down the area that I injected for a whole 3 minutes, it bruises a lot bigger. Because I have tried 2 different methods on each side of my body. So one side has a bruise this big and the other side has no bruises. So for me, that has worked.
Okay.
I don't know. Try it.
Yeah, I actually asked, I did a question the other day of like different things, and a lot of like nurses chimed in and gave a bunch of different tips. And so there's a couple of things, but yeah, one thing they told me, like, don't rub the site, but yeah, holding down makes sense. So yeah, I've been trying a couple of things they've suggested so far this week. I actually haven't gotten a bruise, and I'm like, cool.
Hey, that's good.
It's really like, I'm having a hard time reaching now, like, cause my belly's so big, and I'm just like, this is so, one of the days I just had like a longer day, and I was like, I couldn't get it right. Like, you've just had that time where you just like, it just hurts really bad or something. And I just started crying, and I was just like, just like sitting there with this shock. Just, it sucks.
It sucks. And then the bigger you get, you don't put them on your low belly anymore. I'm assuming you're doing them in your hip.
Yeah, I'm doing
like that is hard. That's hard to navigate around. And for those watching, Lovenox is a blood thinner for an assortment of reasons. Most commonly, it's for a blood clotting disorder, the MTHFR gene, which is very common in Ashkenazi Jews, and 60% of yeah, you do. 60% of the population has a copy of it. Some people with recurrent losses, and I've had recurrent losses, many miscarriages and a stillbirth. Most of us have double copies of the gene. And when you have double copies of it, or you're heterozygous, it means your blood clots a lot more than just one copy of it. So pretty much if they see that you have the gene, they'll throw you on Lovenox. And then right before birth, they switch you, or before a C-section, however you're birthing, they switch you to heparin, because it's a half-life, I think. So you'll switch to that. When are they switching you to that? Like,
I'm going to actually ask him. I have an appointment starting. So next week I start my twice a week appointments, which they'll do NSTs or BPPs, depending,
twice a week. Oh my God, that sounds beautiful.
Oh, I'm like, cool. I really hope it like makes the time speed up, because I'm like, let's do this.
It will.
Yeah, I hope so. So, and I'm prepping to August 10th will be my last day of work. So it's actually it's pretty busy for me with clients the next couple of weeks. So I'm like, okay, great. I hope it just like helps go quicker. But yeah, I've got to ask him actually when they're going to switch me off, or if, there's a couple of things I'm planning to ask, but yeah, it's definitely, I have had a lot of anxiety and nerves around the C-section, but thankfully I've talked to a lot of, lost moms that have kind of eased my mind about it quite a bit, and just sharing like how, it actually was very, if we could call it healing, in a sense of just, it was straightforward and, predictable. Like, I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to go into labor early. I just want to roll up with my bag and, give me the epidural and take the baby out. Like, please, like, just,
I will say
Yeah.
OBs, almost every OB I've worked with, almost always, and I can't speak for everyone, prefer C-sections because it's totally predictable for them. Like they can do them in their sleep.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely choose one too, because you know what you're going to get. And yeah, it's nice to, again, have some control. You are choosing to control how the baby is born, and you're minimizing the risks that would come with a natural labor, which sucks that you even have to think that, but
I know. And it's like, it just goes against everything that I was taught of just like, your body knows all the things, your body knows what to do.
I
And
hate that the most. Your
Oh.
body knows what it's doing. No, it does not. It does
My
not
body
know when it killed my baby.
My body clearly did not know what it was doing, and it
Right.
struggled, and that's really hard. And the babies choose their birthdays, and I'm like, so what are you saying? She chose to die? Like, what?
Yeah.
It's so much to deconstruct and just maddening. But yeah, it's I mean, I again don't take for granted at all being pregnant, again having a second chance to be a parent to a living child, hopefully. I think having the verbiage, that was one thing too, like protected me, I think, in some ways, like having the verbiage and kind of teaching my family, like, hey, this is what makes us feel safe. Like, well, hopefully the baby's coming in August, and if the baby comes, this is what we'll do, versus when. Like, some of that really did help me a lot to not feel anxious and triggering. So kind of my family kind of caught on, when I was like, okay, well, maybe, hopefully, that kind of, it's just kind of like a little bit of like protection in a way for me. I don't know. And it's starting to ease up a little bit, where I'm like, okay, like, I think she's going to be here. I hope, like, it's like we did announce, and it was like, hopefully she's going to, hopefully baby coming, hopefully in August. Like, it was like, that was my board when I did the letters. I literally wrote hopefully, like, yeah. So that's, it's, but yeah.
I get it. My wish for people, and this is, I'm probably speaking to an echo chamber, because the people who are going to watch this podcast are going to probably be lost moms. Most of them are lost moms, or the people who followed me on Twitter after my picture of Fox went viral, like a lot of very supportive people out there who have been through loss or know someone who has. And my ask for everyone else, if anyone's watching this, is before you say something to someone, whether you have birthed a child or not, is take a deep breath and just pause and ask yourself, like, is this something I should say to someone I don't know when I do not know their experience at all? And if everyone did that, could you imagine the verbiage change, or just like the awareness that we could have?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. Yeah. That's such an important little nugget, that how much we would all benefit from.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for spending time to talk to me on the Bluest Circle. And I just want to say, for those watching, one more time, www.thebluestcircle.com is a resource page that is free for lost parents of any kind, or grandparents. Your neighbor has lost a baby. It's all geared towards stillbirth resources. And on that page are just a ton of websites. I'll add you on there, different Instagram handles of people that have been supporting conversations around stillbirth and healing and grief. And this podcast will find its way there. And it will also be on YouTube, where I'm trying to beef up more of a visual podcast sort of feel for people. So thank you so much for telling us about Verity and about your pregnancy. And I hope this is really useful or comforting to other people out there that are about to get pregnant or are pregnant and are going through the same things that
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. I really appreciate it.